What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and we're back here once again for another comprehensive NBA player prop preview for all 7 games on this upcoming slate. As always, I'll be going through all the key players. We'll go through all their props, their lines. We'll talk about their form. I'll call out the best and worst matchups on the night. And I do all this so you can have all the information that you need to make the best bets possible, whether you're betting parlays, whether you're betting multis, single bets. I've got you covered. We used this analysis for my picks yesterday, and we had a great day. Hit a same game parlay for plus 105. We hit one for plus 160. We had Brandon Miller over in points, Jalen Johnson over in assists. Look, it was a great day. So a bit of money in my pocket, so I'm feeling pretty good. So let's jump straight into this one using props.cash to share all this information with you. If you're interested in signing up, you can use my code DAFT25. Let's go. All right, we're starting things off with the Houston Rockets versus the Indiana Pacers. First player to talk through is Tyrese Halliburton. Now, the Rockets allow the 7th fewest points to point guards at the moment. His line is set at 13.5, which is the lowest you've seen it all season. The bookies have finally caught on. He's still on his minutes restriction, and he's got a difficult matchup tonight. So talking about this 13.5 point line, he's covered in 7 of 10, 4 of his last 5. He's had a lot of success against the Rockets, 19, 29, and 33. He obviously played a lot more minutes in those games, so a lot more opportunities. I expect him to play 20 minutes on the dot. And the reason being is he needs to play at least 20 minutes for it to count as a game on the season. He's got a big contract extension opportunity provided he gets an all-NBA team. So he's got to play at least 65 games to qualify for that. So I think he'll play at least 20 minutes. But we've seen in the last 4 games, 22, 21, 21 and a half, and 20 minutes played, he scored 13, 15, 14, and 17 points. Does have a difficult matchup, but he has been averaging more than this 13.5 points in this span, so I think the line is just about right. Looking at his assists in that same span, looking at these 4 games here, 10 against Boston, 5 against the Knicks, 9 against the Kings, and 4 against the Hornets. His line set at 6.5. If you're looking at the under, it's minus 142, so it's quite juiced, but he's only hit this in 1 of his last 4. Once again, difficult matchup against the Rockets to give the 4th fewest assists per game. He has passed the ball well against them, 8, 19, and 10 assists. So he's had some success against them in the past, but can he get it done with limited minutes against a good defense? I'm not too sure. So I'm not man enough to play any bets on Tyrese Halliburton, but I think there is value taking players such as Nembhard or TJ McConnell. So these guys who are going to get more action, given Tyrese is going to get less minutes. Let's talk about Aaron Naismith for a minute. Small forward for the Indiana Pacers. And the Rockets, they do allow the 5th fewest points to small forwards. Aaron Naismith, he's been playing pretty good recently. I've betted him a few times. His line set at 14.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 5, averaging 17 points per game. Last 3 games against the Rockets, 0, 10, and 10. So they did play each other at the end of December. He scored 10 points in that game. He played 30 minutes, and he attempted 6 shots. Now, in his last 5 games, where he's averaging over 17.5 points, he's playing 35 minutes per game, and he's attempting 11.8 field goals per game. So he's getting more activity. He's playing a lot more minutes, but 14.5 points against the Rockets team that allow the 5th fewest points to small forwards. I'm not willing to take that right now, but he is in great form. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go over, but I'm not man enough to take him over or under right now. Next one's Alperen Sengun. The Pacers allow the 3rd fewest points, but the most assists to centers. So check out all 3 of his props. Firstly, in terms of his points, he's covered in 5 of his last 10, but only 2 of his last 5. He scored 30 points in his last matchup against the Indiana Pacers earlier this year. Rebound-wise, he's covered this in 9 of his last 10, averaging 10.8. He had 16 rebounds against the Pacers earlier this season. So, look, it does look great at first glance. Alperen Sengun rebounds. I don't hate that, but there's a reason that it's set at 9.5. Well, 1, it's juiced, minus 136. But you probably need to investigate a little bit further. His minutes are down a little bit over his last 5. But rebound-wise, let's do a quick check, actually. Looking at centers and how they performed rebound-wise. So line set at 9.5. A lot of centers have covered the 9.5 rebound line against them, albeit their lines were a lot higher. So Richards went under, Sabonis went under. Hartenstein had 19 rebounds. Porzingis had 12 rebounds. So they're their recent games. So centers are getting 10 boards against this team, the Indiana Pacers. So I don't mind that. Alfred Şengün, over 9.5 boards. Let's have a look at his assists. His line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. He had 5 assists against the Indiana Pacers when they matched up a month ago. The matchup says that the Pacers do give up a lot of assists to centers. So, yeah, look, I don't hate it, but I really think rebound's probably the way to go for Şengün. So, I'm not too sure, but I'll make a call on that soon. Jabari Smith Jr., the Pacers allow the most points to power forwards. I say that every single time the Pacers play. Unfortunately, Jabari Smith Jr. is in poor form. He's hit this in 2 of 5 of his last 10. He only scored 10 points in that last matchup against the Pacers. Has had some success against them in the past, but yeah, just recently hasn't been getting it done, unfortunately. Rebound-wise, 5 of his last 10, averaging 7. He had 6 rebounds in that matchup against the Pacers earlier this year. But yeah, his last 3 games have been very poor on the defensive, on the rebounding edge. So yeah, not too sure. So have a look at Jalen Green, though. The Pacers, they do allow the 4th most points to shooting guards. So Jalen Green, he's been playing quite well lately. These matchups here against the Raptors and the Timberwolves, they were difficult matchups for shooting guards, and he struggled. But line set at 21.5 despite those 2 slow games. He's hit it in 4 of 10. In his last game against the Pacers, he only scored 5 points. And in that game, he only played 19 minutes and attempted 7 shots. His last 5 games, we're seeing Jalen Green play 33.9 minutes and take 17.2 shots per game. So I don't mind it. Recent form is pretty good for Jalen Green. The activity is there, and he's got a good matchup against the Pacers. I don't hate this, so I wouldn't back the under, but maybe an alternate line for some multis. I'm not too sure yet. Who else is there? Fred VanVleet. Where's his line? It's not available at the moment. Where's Fred? Oh, Fred VanVleet is out. Gosh, there we go. So no Fred tonight. The Pacers, they do allow the least assist to point guards, though. So depending on who lines up for the Rockets, it'll probably be Amen Thompson. But yeah, his lines aren't available just yet. So interesting to see where that lands. Let's look at Miles Turner real quick. Point signs at 15.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. Quite inconsistent, but he's hit this in 3 consecutive games against the Houston Rockets. That's not too bad. Rebound-wise, he's gone under in all 3 games against the Rockets, and he's gone under in 7 of his last 10. So line at 7.5. Jeez. Miles Turner. Got me leaning towards the under, although the Houston Rockets do give up some rebounds. But yeah, I think, look, out of this game, I think Alfred Şengün rebounds. That seems like a good one. Oh, we forgot Pascal Siakam. Line's at 21.5. He's hit this in 5 of 10, 3 of 5. Last matchup against the Rockets, he scored 23 points, but that was last season. Rebound-wise, line's at 6.5. He's got this in 5 of his last 10. Assists, line's at 4.5. He's also hit that in 5 of his last 10. So Pascal, a little bit inconsistent, doesn't have a favorable matchup with any prop. So forgive me if I miss the details on Pascal, but look, I think he'll do okay. That's what I'll say. If you've got parlays for 15 points, why not? Chuck it in there. But I don't like any prop in particular for Pascal. Let's jump into the next one. Dallas Mavericks versus the Brooklyn Nets. A lot of game time decisions in this one, so there's limited markets available. But we do have props available for Kyrie, Luka, and Josh Green at the moment. Looking at Kyrie, points-wise, just came back from injury against Philly, scored 23 points. Still played 34 minutes. He's hit his points line in 6 of his last 10. Rebound-wise, he got 5 boards against the Philadelphia 76ers on his return from injury. And assist-wise, he had 8 assists in that game. But if Luka plays, probably see less assists from Kyrie. So Luka, real quick, line set at 33.5. He's covered in 5 of 10, 3 of his last 5. Played very well against the Brooklyn Nets. Scored 49 points against them earlier this year. Look, if Luka doesn't play and Kyrie does, up against his old team, yeah, he only scored 17 points against them last time, but he could put on a magical performance. Luka's rebounds, he's covered in 4 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5, 10 rebounds against the Nets earlier this year, and assist line at 8.5, covered in 6 of his last 10, and had 7 assists against the Brooklyn Nets earlier this year. Let's jump into the next one. It's the Orlando Magic versus the Miami Heat. So a lot of players are available in this one, and a lot of people have difficult matchups in this one. Both teams, I would say, are probably a lot better on the defensive end. Not the strongest offensive outputs you would expect from these types of teams, but let's talk through the big dogs in this one. Paolo Banchero. So the Heat allow the 3rd fewest points to power forwards. These guys are in the same division, so they get to verse each other quite a lot. So some good form that we can go through. He's hit this 22.5 point line in 4 of his last 5, 6 of his last 10, but he's only hit this in 1 of his last 6 games against the Miami Heat. They've already played each other 3 times this year, and he's covered that line once. Rebound-wise, has rebounded very well against Miami, covered in 5 straight games against them, averaging 9 rebounds per game. Over his last 10, he's only hit this 4 times and 2 of his last 5. But the track record, the history is there. He's done it before. There's probably reasons why he's struggled rebounding against certain teams, but I encourage you to investigate that a little bit further. Assist-wise, he's been passing the ball excellently. Look at that. He's covered this line of 4.5 in 7 straight games, 8 of his last 10, and against the Miami Heat, he's covered in 3 of his last 6, but 3 of his last 4. So first 2 games this season, 8 and 6, but then more recently he had 2 assists. So I don't mind his assist line, to be honest. You would have to investigate this game here to figure out what happened, why were his assist numbers so low, who was in, who was out. And I think the easiest way to do that, I would just jump onto Google, type in Orlando Magic versus Miami Heat. ESPN will have a review of each game, so you can read that review to really understand what happened. You can also just check the box score from the 3 games, check the lineup, because the Magic have had a lot of injuries. Franz had some time out as well throughout this stage of the year. Fultz has been in and out of the lineup. Pretty much the whole backcourt to Gary Harris. So, yeah, I would check it. Even Miami have had a lot of ins and outs. So those would be pretty vital. That would be vital information when you do your research. Let's look at Franz Wagner. Now, Franz, the Heat allow the 6th fewest rebounds, but the 5th most assists to small forwards. Franz has been assisting the ball quite well. 4 of his last 6. He's only played the Miami Heat twice this year. Had 5 assists in both of those games. Last 10, covered this 6 times. He's covered this for 4 of his last 5, but you only get this for minus 150. So you'll get plus money if you take 4.5, and you get pretty shit odds if you take 3.5 for Franz. Looking at his rebounds, it's a tough matchup. 5.5 is his line. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. And, yeah, pretty inconsistent, but he has got it done before against Miami. Points-wise, he's gone under his points line in all his games against the Miami Heat. And in his last 10, he's only covered this line 3 times, averaging 19.4. So, look, he's going to get very close, I think, but chances are he goes under. But, yeah, I'm not man enough to play that. Who else have we got? Jimmy Butler. Let's talk about Jimmy Buckets. Now, this one's a bit of a difficult one because, you know, he technically is playing power forward, but he doesn't play like a power forward at all. Definitely a 3. So when you're looking at his matchup, the good thing is how the Magic defend small forwards and power forwards quite similarly. So the Magic allow the 2nd fewest points, the 4th fewest rebounds, and the 6th fewest assists to small forwards. They also allow the fewest points and the 2nd fewest assists to power forward. So it's a difficult matchup for Jimmy Butler. So despite him killing this line in 5 consecutive games, he's averaging 26 points per game in his last 5. The line is set at only 18.5. He's also hit this in 3 of his last 4 games against the Orlando Magic, but only scored 15 points when he played them this year. So, look, his recent form is great. He's got a difficult matchup, and he went under in his last matchup against the Orlando Magic. So, tricky one there. Similar with his rebounds, 4 of his last 5. He's gone over in 3 of his last 4, but he went under his rebound line in his last game against Orlando. And with his assist, he went under as well. So, yeah, Jimmy's going to be a difficult one because his PRA has been great recently, but he only had 21 PRA when they last versed the Orlando Magic, but he has got it done against them last season. So, yeah, quite a difficult one to choose there, but I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. Let's have a look at Tyler Hero. The Magic allow the 6th fewest assists to shooting guards. So Tyler Hero lines at 3.5. He's covered in 1 of 6 against the Magic. In his last 10 games, he's covered it 4 times, but 4 of those times were in his last 5 games. So definitely getting the assists up. His line at 3.5 is at plus money, plus 112. So you got to determine what's more important here, his recent form or the fact that he's had difficulties against the Orlando Magic in the past. I'm not too sure. I don't like betting on Miami Heat games purely because their points, rebounds, and assists can literally come from 4 or 5 different players. It's a bit difficult to predict. Looking at his points, he's covered in 6 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. So his line's at 16.5. It's the lowest we've seen all season. Has had his difficulties against the Magic, but has had some good games against them too. Terry Rozier, the Magic allow the 5th most points to point guards. He's got over in his 4 consecutive games against the Magic, but none of these are in a Miami Heat uniform. His line's at 14.5. He's covered that in his last 2 games, 15 and 17, 3 of his last 5. But I'm not sold on that. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. He's covered that in 4 of his last 5. And he's also covered that against the Orlando Magic more recently. But again, he was a member of the Charlotte Hornets. So that makes it even more difficult to ascertain. So have a look at Bam Adebayo. The Magic allow the 8th fewest assists to centers. So looking at his assists, he's gotten 7 assists in his last 2 against the Orlando Magic. Looking at his last 10, he's covered this 6 times, averaging 3.9. So, yeah, difficult one to get a read on there with Bam Adebayo. Points-wise, over in 4 of 10. He's gone over in his last 3 games against the Orlando Magic. But one thing to keep in mind is his points line was quite high in these games. So he covered 17.5 points, but he was expected to score a lot more than he actually did. So difficult matchup for Bam. Rebound-wise, he's got 11 rebounds in his last 2 games against them. And looking at his last 10, he's covered this in 7 of his last 10. He's covered in 5 straight, averaging 12.4 rebounds. Line set at 10.5. You can get that at plus money, and I honestly don't hate that. Covered in his last 2 against the Magic, and his recent form has been great. Don't hate that at all. So, look, out of everything I've gone through today, probably Bam rebounds, Banchero rebounds. I think there'll be quite a few rebounds in this game because the defense should be good, but also the pace will be slow, so there'll be less opportunity. Let's jump into the next game. It's the Memphis Grizzlies versus New York Knicks. We've got limited markets available in this one, so I'll hit on the key ones. I want to kick it off with Isaiah Hartenstein and his rebounds, though, because this is definitely a bet that I'm going to take. So I might spend a little bit more time explaining this one to you. Line set at 11.5 rebounds now. So it's moved up from when I looked at it a few hours ago. But the Grizzlies are now the second most rebounds to centers. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. These 3 games against Toronto, Miami, and Charlotte, limited minutes for him. So he's been playing 30-plus minutes. If I filter this out to his last 10 games where he played more than 30 minutes, you can see he's now covered that in 7 of his last 10 games. Philly, difficult matchup, of course. Minnesota, the hardest matchup. And the Houston Rockets, we just saw it earlier in the preview because we looked at Miles Turner, don't allow many rebounds to centers either. So outside of that, he's been absolutely banging. So he's got the best matchup available here. I know I'm going to be taking him for over 11.5. But I'll also be taking him for 16 rebounds as well. But check the final pinned comment that I leave. It'll probably be posted an hour after I post this video. I'll put a pinned comment up with my bets. But yeah, this one I really do like. He's covered it very well. The matchup is excellent. So I can't see how he doesn't get these boards. The Grizzlies allow the 2nd or 3rd most rebounds in the league, and they give up a lot to centers. So Isaiah Hartenstein, get busy, my boy. Let's have a look at Dante DiVincenzo, though. So we bet on him last time they played. He's been killing his points line. He's been shooting a whole lot of 3-pointers, but his line's now at 22.5. It's the highest it's been all year, and that's because of the volume he's been putting up shots over the last 4 games. But it's a difficult matchup for him today. The Grizzlies are now the 4th fewest points and the 3rd fewest 3-pointers made to shooting guards. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further here, you can see DiVincenzo in his last 4 games, check that out. 15, 15, 16, and 16. Those are 3-point attempts alone. So he's making a large portion of his points from downtown up against a gritty Grizzlies team who don't allow many 3-pointers made to shooting guards. Defensively, they're great. They don't allow many points either. And this is how Dante DiVincenzo gets paid. So having a look here, we can see in his last game, he made 10 field goals. 6 of them were from 3. The game prior, 8 field goals, 4 of those were 3s. Against Utah, he made 11 shots, 9 of them were 3s. And against the Hornets, he's made 10 buckets, 5 of them were 3-pointers. So if you're going to have a difficult time from downtown, it might be difficult for him to cover this 22.5 point sign. I'm not saying to take his under, I'm just saying he's got a difficult matchup. So I'm not taking his over, is what I'm saying here. Let's have a look at Josh Hart, though. Josh Hart, the Grizzlies allow the 6th fewest assists to power forwards. Now, this guy is capable of a triple-double. Got one against the Utah Jazz. Line's at 4.5. He's gone under in his last 2. So he's got a difficult matchup. I wouldn't take the over there. Rebound-wise, he's an absolute beast, though. Check that out. His rebound numbers are wild. He's covered this in 5 straight, averaging 10.8 boards. I'm not too worried about his head-to-head matchup because last time he versed Memphis, he only played 28 minutes and he got 7 boards. In his last 5, he's playing 38.7 minutes per game. So, yeah, I don't mind Josh Hart to get some boards as well. So, Hartenstein and Hart. I played them last time actually in the same game parlay. I might do it again, but I don't mind that at all. Let's have a look at Jalen Brunson real quick. Points-wise, line set at 32.5. He's covered it in his last 2 games, but only 4 of his last 10. Last 2 matchup against the Grizzlies, he's gone under this line. He scored 15 and 30 points, but that was in 2022. So looking at his rebounds, 5 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5, and assists, lines at 7.5. The Memphis Grizzlies don't allow too many assists. It's not the hardest matchup, so I'm not going to call that out, but they're pretty good defensively. 7.5 assists, and if Dante's not going to be making a lot of threes, that might be difficult for Brunson to get. But he's covered this in 5 of 10 and 3 of his last 5. So there's nothing I really like about Jalen Brunson to bet on in this game. Hartenstein, Josh Hart, most definitely. So might even chuck the Knicks money line in there. Let's see. Check the pinned comments. Let's jump into the next one. It's the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Chicago Bulls. And we're starting off with Nikola Vucevic. Mentioned a bit earlier when we were talking about Hartenstein's rebounds. Difficult matchup for Vuce today. The Wolves allow the least rebounds to centers over the last 30 days. So we'll start with his rebounds and we'll move around. So his line's at only 9.5. He's covered that in 7 of his last 10 and 2 of his last 5. His last game against the Wolves, though, had 11, and the one prior, he had 9. So I think this line is just about right. You can see using this black line here, his line is normally sitting at 10.5 or 11.5. He's got the difficult matchup, so now that line is 9.5. So he's been covering this quite well, but yeah, I wouldn't be man enough to take the over on that one because I think he does get very close. If you look at parlays, I think 8 rebounds he can get there. Just because it's a difficult matchup doesn't mean he's going to get none. I think it just means it's going to be difficult for him to dominate on the boards. Points-wise, line's at 16.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. Scored 23 and 21 points against Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves last year. So I don't mind his points. And assist-wise, no, nothing here. 4 of his last 10, gone under in 5 straight. Did get 4 and 5 assists in his last 2 games against Minnesota, but yeah, nothing doing for me there. But I don't mind Nikola Vucevic's points. Let's have a look at Rudy Gobert. Check out his points and rebounds. Line's at 13.5. He's covered this in 6 of 10, 4 of his last 5, scored 21 points in his last matchup against the Chicago Bulls. Rebound-wise, line's at 13.5, 4 of 10, 2 of his last 5, but he had 19 rebounds against the Chicago Bulls in his last matchup. So, yeah, Rudy's a little bit difficult because his lines are usually quite high, and he's capable of absolute domination on the boards. But you just got to get Rudy at the right time, really. So I don't think in this game, I don't think it is the right time. I want to have a quick look at Dosunmu's points prop. So his line's at 12.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10 and 4 of his last 5. Line at 12.5 though, and that's because the Wolves allow the least points to shooting guards over the last 30 days. So it's going to be a difficult matchup for him, but his recent form has been great. Last 2 games against the Wolves, he scored 5 and 4 points. Let's have a look at Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, when it comes to the Bulls, you know that they're power forwards. They give up a lot of rebounds to them. So the Bulls allow the 3rd most rebounds to power forwards over the last 30 days. Cat's hit this in 6 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. I personally don't like betting on Karl-Anthony Towns because he doesn't have that dog in him, and his voice is a little bit too high for me. But points-wise, line's at 22.5, 4 of his last 10 and only 1 of his last 5. Assist-wise, 5 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. Having a look at DeMar DeRozan. Now, similar to Jimmy Butler, he's a small forward, but he's playing the 4 spot. But the Wolves do allow the 2nd fewest points and the least assists to power forwards, I believe. So difficult matchup for DeRozan. But again, he's really inconsistent. Would you really bet on him? Look at this. 4 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. Has had some monster scoring games against the Timberwolves in the past, though. 29 and 49. 14 boards in that game, too. Looking at his assists, 6 of his last 10, and rebounds, 5 of his last 10. So rather inconsistent. If I was going to pick anything, it would be his points, but I think there are a lot better options on the board. Let's have a look at Kobe White. Now, the Wolves allow the 6th fewest points and the 4th fewest rebounds to point guards. It's a difficult matchup for Kobe. Line 22.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. He's gone under last 2 games against the Wolves, but he was playing off the bench. Rebound-wise, he's covered this in 7 of 10, 4 of his last 5. Assist-wise, he's covered that in 4 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. So I think there's a lot of things in this game that I would just stick away from. Defensively, both teams seem to be pretty good. Vucevic points, they're okay. But nothing else I'm really loving. Let's have a look at Ant Edwards. I don't normally like his props. I think his prop lines always seem to be too high for me. But the Bulls, they do allow the 5th fewest rebounds, but the 7th most assists to shooting guards. But looking at his points, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. There's his head-to-head matchups with the Bulls. That was a while ago. Rebound-wise, 6 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. And assist-wise, yeah, he's got a good matchup when it comes to his assists, but he's only hit that in 2 of his last 10 games. So, yeah, I'm not feeling it. Let's jump into the next game. It's the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Utah Jazz. Looking at Chet Holmgren, so there's very limited markets at the moment. So we'll start with Chet. Looking at his points, lines at 17.5. He's hit this in 3 of 10, 2 of 5. He's gone under in both of his games against the Utah Jazz this year. Rebound-wise, lines at 7.5. You get that for plus money. He's hit that in 5 of his last 10. And he's hit that in 1 of 2 games against the Jazz. So nothing strong coming out of that. Assist-wise, he's hit this in 6 of 10, 3 of his last 5. And 1 of 2 games against the Jazz. So I'm not really feeling Chet, to be honest. But let's have a look at SGA. Now, we know the Jazz allow the 4th most assists to point guards. But firstly, looking at his points, 31.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. Pretty much scored 30-plus points, 9 of his last 10 games. Against the Utah Jazz, scored 30-plus points in 4 of his last 5. Looking at his rebounds, he's covered that in 4 of his last 5. 6 of his last 10. And assist-wise, had 14 assists against the Raptors, which is pretty wild. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. This line is juiced minus 148. And there are his assist numbers against the Utah Jazz. So, yeah, not feeling them too much either. Let's have a look at Colin Sexton. Now, he's a combo guard. So, you got to look at both guard spots to get a feel for how they could play. But the Thunder, they allow the 5th fewest assists to point guards, but they also allow the 6th most points to shooting guards. So a lot of the time he does play point guard on the court. I know Chris Dunn starts there, but if you watch the way that they play, he does generate and create a lot of their offense. And by what I mean by create their offense, he usually just tries to score. So he plays like a shooting guard, but dominates the ball like a point guard. But anyway, he's got 31 points in his last matchup against the OKC Thunder. 20 points the game prior. So 2 straight games where he's covered this line. In his last 10, he's covered this 7 of his last 10 games, 3 of his last 5. Looking at his assists, line's moved down to 5.5. It was hovering around 6.5 for a while. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10, 4 of his last 5, and had 7 assists in his last matchup against the OKC Thunder. So I do like his points prop more than his assist prop. Don't mind that, but yeah, not the strongest love for it right now. The next one is for Lauri Markkanen. Lines at 24.5. Scored 26 points in his only matchup against him this season. Last 10, he's covered in 5 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. Rebound-wise, 4 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. But has gotten 10 rebounds in 3 straight games against OKC. Line set at 9.5, and you can get that for plus money. I'm not saying go ahead and take it because his recent form is a little bit cray-cray at the moment. But look, the historical form is there for Lauri. Let's jump into the last game. It's the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Phoenix Suns. First player we'll look through is Devin Booker. So the Bucks, they allow the 3rd most points to point guards. Devin Booker lines at 28.5. He's gone under this in 4 consecutive games. In 2 games against the Bucks, this is last season, 24 and 30 points. So Phoenix Suns, another one of those teams that is very deep, can get points, rebounds, and assists from a lot of different players. So you've really got to find the right matchup and right motivation for these guys. Devin Booker rebounds, 5 of his last 10. Looking at his assists, lines at 5.5. He's covering 4 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. So Booker has really started to simmer off. There's no highlights or headlines for him at the moment. Kevin Durant, though, the Bucks do allow the 3rd fewest assists to power forwards. Now, he was passing the ball very well up until that game against the Washington Wizards where he only had 3 assists. But he's covered this line in 6 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5. Last matchup against the Bucks was in December 2022, so I wouldn't worry about his historical form. Points-wise, 5 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. He's covered 25.5 points. And rebound-wise, 5 of his last 10 as well. So not loving the Kevin Durant props on this one. We'll stick with the Suns, though. Let's have a look at Bradley Beal. Now, he doesn't have a matchup advantage or disadvantage, so let's just take it as it is. Scored 43 points against the Washington Wizards. 3 of his last 10, though. 1 of his last 5. Rebound-wise, he's covered this in 4 of his last 10 and 2 of his last 5. And assist-wise, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10, but 4 of his last 5. So passing the ball quite well, but the line's at 5.5. That's the highest we've seen his assist line all season. I do think he's going to get close to it because the Bucks, they allow quite a few assists. They allow a lot of points. Their defense isn't great. And under Doc Rivers, they're not playing any better than they were prior. So don't mind that at all. Let's have a look at Yusuf Nurkic. So the Bucks allow the 4th most points and the 2nd most assists to centers. So Yusuf Nurkic is capable of both of these. His last 3 games, he's been scoring the ball quite well. 28, 14, and 18 points. His last matchup against the Bucks, he did score 16 points, but again, that was in 2022. So his recent form, like 3 games, like very recent form, is great scoring the ball. But over the season, he's covered this in 21-47. Rebound-wise, line's at 10.5. He's covered this in 5 of 10. Might be difficult for him to get some rebounds in this game if the matchup is with Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez spends a lot of time outside, so that could make it difficult for Nurk. But assist-wise, check this out. He's very capable of crushing a line here. Line's at 3.5. He's capable of 8, 9 assists. He's done it many times this season. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5. We know that the matchup for centers to get assists is quite good. So let's quickly have a look here. So what this box here on props.cash tells me, Walker Kessler covered his assist line. Dwight Powell covered his assist line. Kleber did. DeAndre Ayton fell half as an assist under. Nikola Jokic had 12 assists against them. Valanciunas had 6 assists against them. So Jarrett Allen had 5 assists against them in this game. So they've definitely given up assists to centers for sure. And the matchup calls that out. For Nurkic to get 3.5 with the scorers that the Phoenix Suns have, I don't mind that at all. I like Nurkic assists. That's something that I might even consider laddering. So take him for 4, take him for 6, take him for 8, perhaps. Not too sure. But check that pinned comment to see what I end up on, or do your own research and make your decision from there. Dame Lillard, I like his matchup in this one. So the Suns allow the 2nd most points and the 5th most assists to point guards. Those 2 things are right up Dame's alley. His line is at 23.5, which is the lowest it's been in the last 10 games. He's covered this line in 5 of 10, 3 of his last 5, scored 41 points in his last matchup against the Suns, but that back in 2022. And looking at his assists, line's at 6.5. He's covered this in 5 of 10 and 3 of his last 5. Let's have a look at point guards and how they've passed the rock against the Suns. Tyus Jones, 8 assists, line was 6.5. Jordan Poole, 7 assists, line was 4.5. Trae Young, 15 assists, line at 10.5. So they're the last 2 games. So that's pretty juicy. That's not too bad. Points-wise, Tyus Jones covered his line. Jordan Poole shot the ball terribly, shot it plenty of times, but missed a lot. Trae Young covered his points line as well. So, yeah, Dame Lillard points and assists perhaps at 30.5. That's not bad at all. But the matchup is great. There should be a lot of points. Neither team's prioritizing defense at the moment. But let's have a look at Chris Middleton. Now, he's got a difficult matchup. The Suns allow the 3rd fewest points and rebounds to small forwards. Chris Middleton lines at 16.5. Pretty consistent with how it's been recently. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. And in rebounds, he's hit this in 4 of 10 and 3 of his last 5. So, yeah, probably leaning to the under, but not willing to take that. Let's have a look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, the Suns allow the 3rd fewest rebounds to power forwards. Rebound-wise, his line's at 10.5. That's the lowest his rebound line has been in the last 10 games. So, obviously, the matchup factor influencing the line here. But he's hit this in 5 of his last 10, 2 of his last 5. The way that I would study Giannis for this particular game is I'd probably jump on a stats muse and look up Giannis's game log versus Kevin Durant. So, if he is the main defender on Kevin Durant, it's going to be him and Chris Middleton, I imagine. then you get a good idea of how does Giannis play against KD. Let's have a look at his points prop. Line's at 33.5. He's hit this in 2 of 10, one of his last 5. Assists, line's at 6.5. He's hit this 7 out of 10 games in 2 of his last 5. So I think if you're looking at an assist prop, I'd probably just take Giannis for 10 assists. If I was going to consider taking his overs, I would take him at 10, get that juicy value, because by the looks of it, if he's going to cover this line, he's going to get very close to 10. So I'd be willing to risk it. Play it down to 9 if you want to. But again, this doesn't have me erect at all. Doesn't get me frothing. Brook Lopez, he can do some damage. The Suns allow the 4th fewest rebounds to centers. His rebound prop's at 5.5, but he hasn't been rebounding well since Doc stepped in. Points-wise, he's been scoring quite well in his last 3 games. He's covered in 3 straight. And against the Phoenix Suns, he scored 20-plus points in 2 consecutive games. So that's a very interesting one, Brook Lopez. And that requires some investigations. But I don't mind that for Brook. He's got my attention. Brook Lopez points. So in this particular game, there's a few things that I do like. So Yusuf Nurkic's assists, that's got me thinking. Maybe his points. Dame points and assists, that's for sure. Giannis, potentially his assists. Out of the Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Chris Middleton. Yeah, don't really like many of those. So Brook Lopez points, Nurkic points and assists, Dame points and assists. Those are the ones that have my attention. But check the pinned comment and we'll see where I land. Now, I didn't pump the brakes on this video purely because I know that this video is going to come out a little bit later than usual. So on Tuesday nights like tonight, I play basketball myself. So after work, do my family stuff, go play my game, come back. Before I even jump in the shower, I'm icing my knees right now. I wanted to do this preview, get the analysis out to you. So it is going to be later than usual, but you'll still have plenty of time to use all this information to make all the best bets that you can. I want to say thank you to everyone who left me a comment in the last video. I did read through those. A lot of different types of responses, but I think overall, a lot of people were just saying, keep doing what you're doing. But I did want to respond to those people who were saying, don't do the full preview. Pick 4 or 5 of your best bets and only share those. I'm not going to do that because I was doing that before. The channel wasn't getting much traction, and the success of the channel was purely dependent on whether I shared a winning bet. And then that channel pretty much made mine the same as a lot of others. So everybody else is doing that. I'm trying to find my own lane. I know for a fact that I am not the best capper better out there. There's a lot better bettors than I am. But where my strength is dissecting all this information. And I'm pretty good at explaining it too, and I think if I teach a man to fish, that guy can fish for a fucking lifetime, or whatever that quote is. I ain't giving out free fish because, one, I wouldn't trust myself to provide winners on a consistent basis. I still share my bets, don't get me wrong. I'm very transparent in that. But I'm not going to move down that path of just picking 5 and then selling them to you, really. I really want to encourage you to do your own research. You can use tools like props.cash, but there are free tools out there where you can do your own analysis and find your own winners. Because winning a bet is fun. I get it. That's a great feeling. But I promise you, nothing feels better than winning a bet that you've done the research for. You've made the decision to make that bet, and then you win based off your own analysis. If you just get a bet that somebody else has told you to bet and it wins, it's not the same feeling. I promise you that. So I'm going to try to dedicate my time in this channel to helping you make your own decisions. So if what I'm going to do moving forward is I'll do a very similar layout of this video. But if I do find a particularly matchup, or if there's data that really interests me, I'll then probably do a deeper dive in that moment. Bit harder for me to do that tonight because I know I'm putting this video out later than usual. But when we're going BAU, business as usual, when I do find something good, I'll spend more time previewing it, going a little bit deeper to help you guys out. But hopefully that all makes sense. If not, drop me a comment and I'll read it. But I wanted to respond to that. So I want to say thank you for everyone who left me a comment in that last video. I do appreciate it. Some really nice ones out there. Melted my heart today, I'll tell you that. But look, that's enough from me. Best of luck. Hope we have another winning day. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.